parents who tried their best to raise their kids to be good humans, but they turned out to be jerks. What do you wish you did differently? I guess I'm that dirtbag kid. My parents were incredibly strict and controlling, and my parents did not practice or express unconditional love. I had to earn my place with them. My mother is very religious to the point of absurdity. If I ever wanted to express myself in a way that was slightly nonconformist, it was a huge problem. My father just wanted to watch TV, smoke his cigs, and be left the heck alone. They made me spend my free time as a teenager working because if my dad had to go to work, so did I. I was incredibly rebellious until about 17 when I realized I was at the end and would be free soon. I just put my head down and took their criticism and bullying until I got to walk out their door free. My childhood was pure punishment and my home was a prison. I left home and I was just like a not well socialized person and my sense of self was always negative. I used lots of substances and alcohol and created problems for myself. I had a survivor mindset. I had to do whatever I had to do to survive because I just couldn't go back home. The world really beat me down and put me in my place. I have a lot more humility now. I'm kind of a broke loser, but I work all the time. I don't think I'll ever thrive in a material sense, but getting some peace of mind and perspective has made me appreciate my situation. For what it's worth, I have no children, just to be clear. I think kids need unconditional love from their parents. They should be held accountable for mistakes, but they are humans and some mercy for their misgivings is required. You should probably do more to culture their kids than just expose them to church and labor. Maybe take them to a museum or something, and you should probably not punish them for having their sense of self and expression. But I'm skeptical that even the most well-intentioned person can break the cycle of misery and working-class drudgery. I feel so sorry OP had to go through all this. He should be proud of himself, actually, for coming out the other end with so much self-reflection. We underestimate the power of pure love and all that goes with it. Physical affection, moral support, acceptance, and open-mindedness, clear boundaries, and so on. Every single child deserves that, at least. Story 2. I have one kid who's awful. I don't know what I could have done differently, which doesn't answer this question. I was told by a psychiatrist that he had a very low chance to be a functional adult when he was 3. I got him in home therapy, an in-home behaviorist moved to enroll him in a pilot program for severely mentally ill preschoolers, enrolled him in another peer model program in the same building so he had hours and hours of therapy a week with caring adults both in-home and at school. He had to attend daycare for 1 day a week because both programs were only 4 days a week, so many social skills groups. He was kicked out of so many daycares, I would immediately look for another one when he started one because he was so violent he sent kids to the hospital at 3. 3! I went to parenting classes and had parent training in person with my son. This level of intensity continued until he went to a residential treatment facility when he was 11, and he was there until 13. He's had 2 involuntary hospitalizations in the past 16 months because he was violent to me, 10 inpatient stays over the course of his life. I can't make him leave. He's 19 now. His brother, who was born when he was 7, is the kindest, most gentle child I've ever met, and he's had an objectively worse childhood. His teachers tell me often how articulate he is and how well he navigates interpersonal conflict. I wish I could be a better parent to him. I think he's going to be okay. He's in therapy and has support in school, but I'm at a loss as to what I could have done differently with my older son. I think some people are just born not quite right. Maybe that makes me a jerk. Story 3. Don't try to make introverted kids into extroverted kids. I'm an extrovert, and so are my parents, but all 3 of my children were introverts, which I didn't realize until they were all adults. I can whiz into any social setting late or disheveled and then humor my way out of feeling shame or embarrassment. But what I realize now is that such behavior was sorta traumatizing my little introverts who preferred to blend in with walls. I think they're somewhat bitter about me not fully understanding them. I thought everyone desired to be a part of big, exciting experiences and to ambitiously network for connection and opportunity. I've learned that often parents put pressure on their kids to act as an extrovert. For example, a younger friend of mine has 3 girls and one of them is extremely shy. At a birthday party, all of the children played Ring Around the Rosies and other group games. The shy one refused to join, and fortunately, her mother didn't force her. But I've witnessed many parents getting angry, embarrassed, or even threatening when a child is not comfortable jumping right into such activities. The reason she didn't force her was because, as a mother of three adult introverts, I had told her that if I had to do it over again, I would want to be more aware of my children's personality types, and I would try to avoid assuming that they would want what I wanted more of as a child. I hope this makes sense. Yes, it does make sense. And I hope she talked to her kids about this too, like eventually, it might be just what they need to hear, even if they're adults already. Story 4. My kid isn't a jerk, but he has an unusual expression of autism, pathological demand avoidance, that got missed until his 20s. Said expression means he panics, stonewalls, fights, defies, or goes catatonic when anyone asks him to do something, and definitely when anyone tries to make him do anything. I made a lot of his childhood sheer hell on both of us, and it's still tough going even as he's doing better now that he's in a new support program. He's constantly depressed, and if you make what he perceives to be a demand of him when he has low blood sugar, he can sometimes turn violent, usually against himself, but sometimes against me. I deeply wish I'd been more of a mama bear about his psychiatric treatment when he was younger. Our insurance put us in a teaching hospital system with high turnover, so he was bounced between providers constantly, going through 5 different psychiatrists in 1 year at once. Every single one would give him a new diagnosis when he started with them, and none of them were right. I wish that I, who has ADHD with terrible executive dysfunction issues and an inability to form habits, had gotten him into more routines that had external reasons. He fights less when demands are them's the rules by the big bosses out there somewhere that you can't personally argue with versus something that I want him to do. Different supports in school and a therapist who understood PDA. Instead, all his therapists all ask him to do things or model particular behaviors, and all that would happen is that he'd start to refuse to speak or attend his sessions at all. I wish that I'd had the time, the resources, and the functioning to dig deeper into getting parenting help. But most parenting kids with depression info is like Depression 101 or tells you to contact other resources that either don't exist or just refer you to other resources that also refer you in a big chain until someone refers you back to where you started. Help had to have existed somewhere, maybe, but I never found it. I tried all kinds of techniques to help, but almost all of them backfired spectacularly. I also wish I taught him far more specifically about social exchanges. He does fine with small talk and hanging out and stuff, but he's the type of person that is instantly recognizable as being weird somehow, even though he didn't do or say anything all that off. Now, this stops him from making friends easily. And when he does make friends, he often gets far too dark far too often, or has odd reactions to things, or shuts down unexpectedly, or gets far too needy because each new person is his only social outlet, and then he gets really, really eager. So most of them don't last long, and most of them ghost. The ones that don't typically manipulate him for their benefit, at least. All the people who make friends with him also have profound issues of their own, which sometimes ends up deeply negatively impacting my son as well. Unfortunately, he sees asking him to work on improving boundaries or understanding others' responses to him almost always as a demand, and so far, has gotten nowhere. It's really tough to exist in a world where your brain makes you rebel against almost every expectation, and even rougher when others just see someone as a giant jerk and not someone deeply struggling. I am really glad that I did manage to not lose him to being an incel or far right wing like a lot of people he knew. He has actually broken up with friends who have gone down that particular pipeline, so at least there's that win. Story 5. I think this about 2 of my cousins. My uncle, let's call him Ed, had a severely strict mother, the type of southern mom that domineered her husband and took no nonsense from her kids, to the extent that all 3 of her kids were estranged from her for a bit, but 2 of them, including my uncle Ed, have been reconnected for decades. My uncle, vowing to never be this strict with his kids, essentially just never disciplined his kids. Whenever Ed and my Aunt Lana had an issue with them, the kids could go to Ed and get out of it because he was kind of a pushover. They grew up to be rude and didn't respect curfews at like age 12. The son always had some sort of issue. My family is very hush-hush about mental health. I think it's ADHD, that led to angry outbursts as a kid, and they tried their best with medication. But it kind of mellowed him out into a shell of himself till they found a better medicine combo. Another thing that may play a role is they're half black, my side, and half white, Ed's side. I won't pretend to know if there is an identity issue growing up, but I was very judgmental of them because they kind of both tried to act ghetto, like they grew up in a tough neighborhood with a hood accent. And I'm like, no, you grew up in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the state with both parents and a lot of chances. So, yeah, last year my mom admitted to me both of the cousins got into substances and had to go to rehab. Again, knowing my family, they'd freak out at grass, but I think it was that and also stimulants. I'm just shaking my head thinking that this is kind of all on my cousins. Yeah, there's a difference between being nice and then being a pushover. Nice people raise nice kids. Pushovers raise spoiled kids. Anyway, since you're already here, I'm sure and hoping that you are connecting with one of these stories so far. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. And also, it really helps me out too. Story 6. Be very careful who you have kids with. If I could do it all over again, I would have chosen better. They ended up with one responsible parent who was completely overwhelmed trying to do the job of two people. This goes for my parents too. My mom was hyper involved while my dad immediately detached the minute we stopped being cute and started having opinions. I see him doing it to his grandkids now. Mom put us in every event, sport, extracurricular. Dad never attended and often had no idea what we did with our time. Mom pushed us to excel academically, and we often were doing super high level classes. Dad assumed we were lazy because we were often tired and didn't have jobs. Hard when you have a double class load as a high school freshman. Dad was also pretty verbally cruel, to me at least. Mom knew we had a negative relationship but never pried and never got involved. She didn't or doesn't know how far it went, to be fair, which also sucked. I think my mom would have been an awesome parent if she had an equal partner, but instead we had an absentee and someone too involved in being everything to actually listen to what was going on. Story 7. You don't have to win every power struggle. I don't have jerk kids, but I do think I've learned a lot from having 4 very different kids, and I think too many parents, 1, think the same strategies work for all kids, i.e., rule, consequence, behavior, falls in line, rinse and repeat, and 2, focus on the behavior rather than the cause. If you have a kid who doesn't respond to your parenting style or philosophy, you should rethink your approach. It's not all the kid's fault. Some kids will burn their lives to the ground to make a point. I have one like that. For too long, it was a vicious cycle of kids act out, I punish, kid is angry, acts out more, so I punish harder. Kid is angrier, acts out even more, and then I punish even harder. And on and on and on and on. Something just needs to break the cycle. For instance, if your kid is challenging your authority, it's usually a bid for more independence. They're trying to be more mature and they want your adult respect. You don't have to excuse the bad behavior, consequences are okay, but you also have to look for ways to help your kid get that need met. You don't have to tie it to the actual incident so it doesn't look like a reward. Give them more responsibility for themselves. Let him walk to school alone if he doesn't get to do that. Quit bugging him so much about what he does with his free time, even if you think he should be getting more fresh air. Look for any opportunity to let him choose something. We're going to do something as a family on Sunday, for example, you can say. You can choose what we do, or where we eat, or whatever. Don't tell him when he has to do his chores. Let him set his Saturday schedule. I need you to mow the lawn and do the dishes today. You can do it any time between now and 6 p.m. Now, if you address the cause of the behavior, it's going to do way more to correct a bad behavior, and you'll also get more respect from your kid. If you insist on winning every power struggle, your kid is going to see everything as a fight. I need to give my wife credit for helping me understand this over the years. She's not only a great mom and a great wife, she's also a really good therapist. She's gained a lot of perspective working with other kids and parents and working on those relationships. Yes, this story is spot on and so far my favorite one, because I learned a lot from it, you know? Let's go, we got more to go. This one is story 8. In my opinion, the one defining characteristic of bad parents is being resentful of their own children. Resentful that they took some of their freedom, resentful of their youth, resentful of their opportunities, resentful of their intelligence, resentful of their beauty, resentful of their possessions, of their education, of their accomplishments, of their happiness, etc., etc. I think this is far more common than most people realize. These parents may consciously provide for their kids while they unconsciously sabotage them. The kids pick up on this and end up aspiring to their parents' unspoken expectations. Good parents want their kids to exceed their own achievements and, most importantly, just to be happy. Good parents are empathetic to their children, they're happy when their kids are happy, they're sad when their kids are sad. Resentful parents don't really want their kids to be happy unless they credit the parents for their happiness. No achievement belongs to the kids, but every failure does. Story 9. I have raised 3 kids, none of them jerks, all good, kind, productive people. However, one of my kids was a difficult, extremely strong willed child. I kept getting caught in power struggles with this child, which was leading nowhere and resulting in us fighting all the time. I felt critical and negative, which I hated. I decided to start catching the child being good. Every time I saw the child behaving or being helpful or successful at something, I commented on it, thanked them, praised them, etc. It was an immediate turnaround. I learned that children simply want your attention. Oftentimes, it is the misbehaving child that gets that attention. Start focusing your attention on when they are good, and you will see good. It was a game changer for us. The child is now a young adult that graduated from college with good grades and got a great job at a prestigious company. They're doing extremely well in life, their career, friendships, romantic relationships. And we have a close relationship, and I couldn't be prouder of the way they turned out. I used a wonderful book called Transforming the Difficult Child. It basically involves giving rewards for good behavior instead of punishing bad behavior. Very quickly, the child realizes that being good is much more productive for them than being bad. I had a checklist of things I wanted to encourage: making their beds, getting their homework done without constant prodding, setting the table, being kind, being polite, etc. They got points for doing each of these things, and we would go over the list at the end of the day. They could then trade in their points on fun things like ice cream, movies, screen time, etc. It really worked well for us. Story 10. My niece, my nephews, oh, those are jerks. They're adults now, still jerks. The nephews are the worst. In a nutshell, they grew up with zero consequences. If they stole, their dad repaid and mom apologized. If they vandalized, their dad repaid and mom apologized. If they acted like jerks towards adults, yes, their dad yelled at them once and then, of course, mom apologized. They're older than my kids. They all acted fine around us as they knew I'd spank them. And I did, more than once. The dad was pissed, mom was happy, I didn't care. Don't like it, don't bring them to my house, go away, mad, fine by me. They eventually stole from every family member but us. Seems the kids with issues that couldn't control themselves could control themselves around the 2 adults who didn't buy in. They all treated the mom horribly. The dad never corrected me. They still do. Not yelling, screaming anymore, just use her and use her. Beg, borrow, steal her money. That's all on her. Almost 40 years later, she hasn't listened or learned. They're a weird little group. It's like them against the world, and they all hate each other. When we first had kids, the mom and dad said, "You'll see." And I laughed in their faces each time. No, I won't see because I see what you are doing so wrong. It's not hard to raise good kids, but it starts from day one, and it's a daily job. My oldest is 21. Great kid, and I correct him on a weekly basis. Small things, but he lives at home and hears dad's input on the tiny things he might want to rethink. Funny thing, bad kids grow up and, as they're growing, never ask for or take the parents' advice. And good kids do so even as young adults. Your kids have to respect you and, I believe, fear you just enough. Not to be afraid, but also to know not to cross lines. I'm sure those kids suck that are nephews and nieces, but spanking a child, especially when it isn't even your own, is a little bit messed up. There's a lot of area to be explored here between no consequences and violence. Story 11. I worked with youth for a while in a poorer rural part of America, and in my anecdotal experience, there are 2 types of kids that can turn into bad humans. One, they've just had tough lives and no good role models. If you get to know them, you realize they're just normal kids that have never been given the tools, opportunity, or encouragement to act any differently. If no one figures out how to intervene, it becomes a pattern of life for them that spirals out of control. 2, kids that never suffer the consequences of their actions. They tend to have really nice caregivers who have a knack for getting their kids out of trouble. When I say they don't suffer consequences, I mean like literally. Their parents do their homework, their parents lie for them, their parents don't ever tell them no. The caregivers also don't supervise them, but whenever anything happens, they are easily manipulated by their child and take whatever their child says as gospel truth without question. And although the parents don't supervise their children, they seem all too willing to give them everything their child asks for within the confines of their economic class. The caregivers are somehow both emotionally neglectful but also always there to help their child out of a jam in a way that feels like they want to be manipulated by their child. Kids in the first category will do something bad, and you go, how could they be so stupid? When kids in the second category do something bad, your reaction is, it's only a matter of time before they end someone. I knew a lot of young adults that got in trouble with the law, but it was only people from category 2 that got tried for gruesome crimes. Well, if any of these stories connected with you and you learned a lesson or two, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.